Hi, I'm Tony, and today we are doing block number 4 for the Retro Gaming Quilt aLong. Now block number 4 is the coins, and this was recorded a few years ago, live on Twitch, where we had a lot of interaction, a lot of things going on, and then I posted it up on YouTube. Now, some people are having problems following the tutorial because of all that extra stuff. So what I've done is I've edited it down as much as I can so that it's more bearable in order to watch the tutorial. So let's get to it. If this block is being made as part of the Retro Gaming Revival Quilt, use the following strips from previous blocks and do not cut extra strips of them. A half remaining, okay, from the Dark Mage. So that is our dog, that's our bubble, here's our Dark Mage. So we need a half remaining 1.5 inch strip. So that is this right here. So do I want the gold or the dark gold? I want the gold. So I'm taking this strip that is the half strip and I'm setting this aside. So by doing that, by setting that strip aside, I'm going to actually go back to here for my gold because it's a 1.5 inch, and I'm going to put a line through here, and I'm only going to cut 2 of the 1.5 inch. So I'm not going to cut. In fact, let me show you on the close-up machine. So this is what I did. So because I took a 1/2 inch strip and set it aside, even though it's only a half, it's not a full strip, we don't want to cut one of our 1.5 inch strips. So we changed that from a 3 to a 2. All right, bright blue, we have 2.5. So we're cutting 2 strips of 2.5. If you're ahead of me, that's okay. And then 1 strip of 1.5. There we go. Perfect. All right, let's set those aside. Oh, you know what? I want to separate my 1.5s from my 2.5s. So by separating, in fact, I'll put it down there so you guys can see. I'm separating out my 2.5 from my 1.5 inch blocks. All right, so let's do this. Now black, I need 1 2.5 and 2 1.5s. Fantastic. All right, so 1 2.5 and 2 1.5s. There we go. And that was our little bit at the end that I could throw away. 1.5 inch strip. Perfect. And let's do there. And then fold there. And that is now ready for my next one. All right. All right, 1 2.5. And then I need 2 1.5s. There's 1. Let's make, oh, I'm just shy of that. I can't use it. All right, well, I've got my 1 there, so I need 2. So 1.5, 3, perfect. From the 1.5 inch strips, we want to cut in half. Now, it says we want to cut in half 1 gold strip. We already have a half gold strip, so we don't have to worry about that. That's set aside. Okay, so we also now need to cut a black, 1 black. Okay. And we've got that. And then we want to cut 1 bright blue. Okay. Oh, and I forgot to mention, this block is actually one of the easiest blocks in the entire quilt. Alright, so we're now cutting solid pieces. So this is the gold fabric. Okay, so gold. I need 14. I like to do things efficiently. So I have the entire strip folded in half, and I'm going to be cutting it by 2s. So let's do that. And hopefully you can see this camera a little bit better. In fact, Let me switch it to that camera. Hopefully you can see this camera a little bit better. I switched cameras and I added a light here to actually showcase this a little bit better. All right, so we're cutting here. So I need 14, 2.5. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 14. Using the 1.5 inch strips, sew the right sides together for each of the following combinations. Okay, so these are my halves, these are my wholes. Half bright blue, okay, to half black. Half bright blue to half gold. Okay, this little half black strip is setting aside. We're just going to put it right over here off to the side. One black to one gold, and then one dark gold to one gold. All right, so we have our layer, we have our stack of strips. Let's sew them. Cut each of these newly combined strips in half. Now, you are not going to cut them in half this way. That would defeat the purpose of what you just did, okay? So what you want to do is take it and fold it in half, just like this, and then cut it in half this way, all right? So cut each of these strips that you just did in half. Good morning, Azure Koi. How are you today? All right, so we've got that. And let's do this. And let's fold that in half. Now, this one is a little bit longer. That's perfectly fine. I'm just gonna lay that one right on top. And last but not least, and cut this in half. Wonderful. And there we are. A lot of people tell you to do this first. This is actually locking your seam in. And then take this top, and I always just do a line down the edge, and then go back and iron it all the way. There we are. So you want to iron towards that dark gold. There we are. I'm going to lay that down. Good afternoon, Potato King. How are you today? And then we want to do the same thing to this one. And let's open this up. So we want to iron this towards the gold. So the last one we ironed towards the dark gold. This one we are ironing towards the gold. Now, what that means when you're ironing towards a color, you want that color to go up like this. And what that does is it creates that seam right there. So you see how the seam is now pointing towards the top? That seam is pointing towards the gold. So let's lay this in here. All right, so we have our gold, dark gold. Just like this. All right. Now, let's go ahead and follow our instructions to how many pieces we need to cut. This up. Now, what I'm doing with this, and in fact, let me give you a nice close-up of this one. What I'm doing with this one is one of these white lines, I'm actually lining up along the seam. So here's the seam right here. So I've actually taken this white line and I've lined it up all the way right here. So it's easy for me to make sure that I'm cutting this straight and I'm cutting it correctly. All right, so the 5 sets of 2.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1 set of 1.5. There we go. And this extra part I'm gonna set aside for possible future blocks. Good morning, Niku, or good afternoon, Niku. How are you today? All right, I've got those. Now, what I'm doing is I'm taking each of these and I'm separating them out into 2 different piles. And what that does is this pile right here, the seams are pointing towards the dark gold. This pile right here, they're pointing towards the gold. So I have my piles separated already so that whenever I'm laying my pieces out, I can just grab them and grab the piece that I need that's facing the correct direction for the seam. Take all of my pieces and lay them out so that I can easily get them. There we are. So there's all my pieces so that I can easily reach over and grabbing them. So this one, whenever I set this down, my seam is pointing down towards the gold. So my next piece is that blue and that black piece. I need it to be pointing up because remember, I talked about nesting the seams. So it's important that your seams face in opposite directions in order to make sure that it nests perfectly. We're doing wonderful with the quilt aLong. Thank you for asking. All right, so going down towards the gold. So we need to go up.
Hold on to your batting, folks.
That light blue.
This is not a drill. The factory is being raided.
Okay, so my seams are now pointing in opposite directions. So I've got that. And then I've got here. And gold. So now this one, my seam's going up towards the light to the blue. So we need to go down towards the black. Just like that. Okay? And then a blue and blue. Now, you may have noticed I am grouping these in groups of 2. So I'm putting each of these in a group of 2. The reason why I do this is to make it a lot easier for when it's time to pin, which is the next step. So whenever I pin it, I know that I'm pinning these 2. I'm pinning those 2. I'm already pinning these together. So it's saving me a step and it's saving room as I'm laying things out onto my mats. So this is row number 3. So in this one, the gold, dark gold needs to go towards the dark gold because remember, the arrows are the ways that our seams point. Okay, and then towards the black. Now, you're going to have an extra one of these left over. That's perfectly fine. Set it aside with the extra pieces for future blocks. All right, so we have all of our pieces laid out. It kind of looks like a wonky coin, right? Because I've got them grouped up into 2s. Normally, every other block until now, we would combine our horizontal pieces. Okay? So we'd combine our horizontal pieces. There are no horizontal pieces this time. Because there are no horizontal pieces, we don't have to do that step. We can go right into pinning. Starting from the top. The very top row that you can't see because it's hidden under the chat is going to the right. Because it's to the right, the easy way to remember, arrows to the right, pick up the right piece. And we're flipping it over the left. And then pinning it into place. Okay, here's the next one. We're taking our right over our left. And pinning it into place. right over left. And pinning it into place. Right over left. And pinning it into place. Right over left. And pinning into place. Alright, the next row is going, my arrows are pointing to the left. Because my arrows are pointing to the left, I'm going to take this left piece, flip it over the right, and pin that into place. Now, the reason why we're doing this, why we are doing it this way, is I am going to be skipping a step and doing an efficiency task. So I'm actually going to be efficient, and as soon as I finish sewing them, I know it's sitting up in the correct way that it's going to be ironed. Because by ironing it this way, my seams are going to point to my left piece. And all I'm doing is I'm sewing each of these with a scant 1/4 inch. There we go. Okay, and then hey Rita Chris, how are you? I'm reaching around, grabbing row number 8, and then bringing it back around. Now, this is important, and this is where I always screw up. When you sew the first one of the next row, cut off the previous row and set it aside. Sometimes I forget to separate them. Sometimes I forget to take off the previous row. And then I'll be like, I'm sewing along, just not paying attention. Sewing along and sewing, and I'm at the road, and then I turn, I'm like, oh wait, oh, that's 2 rows in there, and I gotta figure out where to separate them. So try to pay attention. Try to separate them as you go. Alright, so this is my cutting gizmo from Gypsy Quilter. I'm going to now separate my chained pieces. So the whole point of this is to separate chain pieces. So I'm going to take this. I'm doing fantastic, Red Chris. Thank you for asking. I'm taking this last piece, and all I'm doing is I'm separating them. So I've got the last piece first and setting it aside. Now, do as I say, not as I do. Do not sew over your pins. Sewing over your pins is a horrible, horrible habit that I have done. Alright, let's do some ironing. So, what I'm going to be doing, taking the first row. I'm going to be laying my first row out, right to left. And then, ironing it towards the top. Soleil. No. I think she sees a squirrel out back. Soleil, no. No. Hey. There we go. Now, after I sew that, I'm going to pick it up from the left to the right. Soleil! Yes, this was probably a squirrel out there. Yes, I really do have the best mods. So, left to right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm making sure that these are correct. I did not flip any pieces. I didn't move any pieces. I sewed them all correctly. I have an odd number of pieces. So what this means is I need to leave, or skip any pieces like I did yesterday. So what this means is I need to leave a piece out. All right. Now, remember, we have 2 rows where we have lonely little pieces at the ends. We want to make sure that we include these lonely little pieces. So in order to do that, we want to make sure that we leave the first one out, because we want everything to be uniform. We want all these rows to be the same for the pieces that we leave out. So we're leaving out the first piece, and then arrow goes to the right, so I'm taking it right over left, pinning it in place. She's being very insistent on that squirrel, isn't she? I asked if she wanted to go out when I took my break, and she said no. And set that aside. Right over left. And this is what's called the second pass. It's the second time through that I'm pinning my pieces. Okay, now let's take the next row. It looks like that for that row. So this is row number 9. So what you want to do is take off the left, flip it over the center, and pin it into place. Okay, you want to take the right one, flip it over the center, and pin it into place. So this is what we're going to be doing, because every single one of these rows has 3 pieces. We are going to be efficient and do both of the seams at the same pass. So for this block, for a lot of the blocks you're doing 4 passes. This is probably the only block you're doing 3, and that's it. Just the 3. All right, let's do the next. I'm going to take this bottom row, I'm going to flip it up, and let's pin it. There we are. There we go. What I'm doing is I'm searching for the seams that line up. So in case, like right here, I have the top one is going to the right, the bottom one is going to the left, and I'm making sure that those seams nest. So I'm taking these 2 seams and I'm butting them up right against each other and putting a pin in it. And then I'm going back and putting a pin in all of the other seams, because whenever you sew it, you don't want those seams to flip. If those seams flip, it could cause extra bulk within your quilt top that would make it harder for quilting. And that is the coin block. I hope you learned something today, more specifically how to make a coin block with the Retro Gaming Quilt aLong. Don't forget to like this video, follow my YouTube, as well as Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, my Quite Nerdy Quilters Facebook group. TikTok I do sometimes, Pinterest I hardly ever do, and Twitch, where you can watch and interact with me live. And I also stream live here on YouTube. So feel free to, when you follow my social media, keep an eye on it on Mondays, where I post my live schedule, that you can come and hang out with me.